I wore a Casioak for 30 days and here are my thoughts. I'll admit I've wanted this watch for longer than any other, but I only bought one a month ago for reasons that I'll explain a little bit later on. This is the G-Shock GA-2100, otherwise known as the Casioak. So called because it looks like the AP Royal Oak. Does it? What happened there? It sounds like some marketing exec at G-Shock thought it would be a good way to promote it. Hey Charlie, I thought maybe we could call this new G-Shock the Casioak to make more people buy it, and it worked. This has been a massive seller for G-Shock. I mentioned that I've wanted this watch for a long time. I buy a lot of watches used, but this is without doubt the hardest watch I've ever had to buy used, and that's because it's faked on a massive scale. There are more fake GA-2100s out there than there are fake Gucci bags on a night out in Newcastle town centre. Okay, maybe not, but you get the point. No doubt the F91 is faked more than the Casioak, but the thing with the Casioak fakes is they're very, very difficult to spot. I can barely tell the difference by looks alone. In fact, the only way I can truly tell a legit Casioak is to open up the back and take a look at the insides. A method that I also use to vet my women. That sounds even weirder when I read it out loud than I planned when I wrote it. Ah well, it's forever part of internet history now. Let's get to the watch. And it's a watch that's definitely got one major flaw and a few smaller issues, but we'll come to those a little bit later on. So the Casioak costs around £80, and it comes in a range of colours. I've got the stealth one, which admittedly is pretty hard to read, but there are plenty that are easier to read, so I can't complain about that. Shame. It measures 48.5mm by 45.4mm by 11.8mm. Comes in at just 51 grams. And as it's a G-Shock, you get 200 metres of water resistance like all G-Shocks, mineral crystal, and it can take a bit of a beating too. In fact, my wife threw a right hook at me the other day, and I just got my guard up in time. The G-Shock took most of the force and it held up pretty well. My wife does throw a pretty mean right hook, let me tell you. In terms of features, you've got world time, stopwatch, timer, 5 alarms, hourly chime, an auto calendar, and a light. Let's talk about the design, which is really why this watch sells like toilet rolls in a lockdown. It's not your standard G-Shock design. It's got a much more tactical feel to it, and because it's an anti-digi watch, you get the best of both worlds. Sort of. The octagonal case shape works really well on this kind of watch. It feels really modern without feeling like it's going to date. It's definitely a style over substance watch, and although it does pack in some great features, the tiny digital display, particularly when it's a negative display, isn't the most practical design. But there's a lot to like here. The chunky hands, the exaggerated hour markers, and the angular digital display really look good together. And while this has sold well as a G-Shock, I don't think it's down to how it works. This is a watch design that you're either instantly going to love or you're just not. For me, and this is going to be a little bit controversial, it's the best looking G-Shock there is. I would normally expect to get pasted for saying something like this in the comments, but let's be real. There will only be about 3 of you that get this far into the video. Thanks for watching, Dad, by the way. Almost all of the features are implemented on the digital display. The time is obviously also shown as analog, as is the day of the week with this handy additional dial. When it comes to the world timer, the stopwatch, the alarms, they are all on the digital display, which is not only small, but the hands tend to get in the way. There is a rather cool feature which lets you hold down the adjust button and it will temporarily move the hands out of the way, but this isn't always practical. I was playing football a couple of weeks back with this watch on and I took a quick glance at the stopwatch to see how long was left and the hands were in the way. I didn't have time to hold down the adjust button and take a look at it. So while the features work like any other G-Shock for the most part, they're far less practical. If you really want a G-Shock for the functions, this probably isn't the watch for you. But it is a decent feature set, better than the DW5600E. It's worth mentioning the light on this watch, if only to let you know that it isn't great. It lights up from the bottom right corner, and it kind of lights up about half of the dial. This is enough for you to see the digital display and also work out where the analog hands are, but it isn't great. It's sort of like shining a torch on a tree at night. You can see it's a tree, but you're not exactly lighting the whole thing up. Weird analogy, I know, and if I come up with something better before I've finished writing this, I'll change it. If this line is still in the video, you'll know that I've failed on that part. There is a little loom on the hour and minutes hands, but it's really quite poor. I think G-Shock could do better here. Generally, I'll let watches off for poor loom when they're quite cheap, but this feels like a watch where they could have done better. I would have made a time lapse with the loom, but on balance, it really wasn't worth mine or your time. Now, I've already mentioned some of the failings of the digital display on this one, but there does appear to be a design flaw in the GA-2100 series, and I've seen this many times when I've been looking to make a purchase. For some reason, over time, the resin bezel starts to widen at the 9 o'clock and 3 o'clock positions. I'm not sure what the cause of this is, but it's definitely a problem. Fortunately, you can buy new bezels for these, but it's worth being aware that over time, this is pretty much guaranteed to happen to your watch. It wears pretty much like most other G-Shocks. For me, G-Shocks are never the most comfortable watches in my collection, but for the most part they're okay. They're not watches that I can sleep with on my wrist, but there are times that even the F91 doesn't pass that test either. Generally, it feels okay. I can feel it digging into my wrist a little, even with the strap relatively loose, but as mentioned, I get a small feeling of this with most G-Shocks. So if you've never had that before with G-Shock, you're unlikely to notice it here. From a size perspective, it's great. I think it looks pretty much perfect on my wrist, but I could imagine someone with a much larger wrist saying the exact same thing. It wears well, which is helped out by its relatively slim profile. And for my final thoughts on this one, this is another one of those watches that objectively it's just not great. It's got its flaws and failings, and they're kind of undeniable to be honest, but I just can't help but like the design of this one. And if you really like the design of a watch, you will let a lot of its shortcomings go, just because it looks cool. And yes, I really am that shallow. Normally at this point, I would try and recommend a few other watches in a similar price range that you might like to consider instead of this one. But in this case, just go and pick any other G-Shock that's similar in price. That'll do, pig.